You have now arrived at your destination.
Seba, I'm so excited for this. I heard great things from Oren Zeev and from the team at General Atlantic. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Harry, it's great being here. Thanks very much for having me.
Not at all, but I want to start with a little bit on you. So tell me, dLocal is one of the most fascinating stories. It is a machine of a company, and actually quite under the radar, respectfully. So tell me, how did you come to be CEO of dLocal?
So Harry, it's this year. It's year number 10, and it was absolutely by chance. So I was in Montevideo, where I was born, and at my mother's-in-law birthday party, and I met one of my partners, and he tells me we're starting a company. I was back then trading stocks and bonds at Santander Bank. I studied economics, so it was supposed to be what one was meant to do. And he told me, look, we're starting this company, come join and see how it looks. And that's how I'm here 10 years later, absolutely by chance. Obviously, I have no idea about payments. The good things about payments is that it's like an onion. You keep peeling it and you think, now I understand it. And then you realize that there's more and more layers. So absolutely by chance. I would have had no idea that I would be here 10 years later, by no chance.
Can I ask you a question? And I often think about this one. And I sent you the schedule beforehand. I'm like, oh, can I ask you a random question that I just thought about? Luck and skill. I think, people often kind of conflate the two, but then also don't appreciate that actually a lot is skill as well. How do you think about the role of luck and skill in your progression to be CEO today?
I think no one would disregard luck. It's impossible to disregard. Obviously, you need to work extremely hard and you do everything you can to go after it. We're going to be discussing a little bit more, but I really suffer when we lose. And it's something that I think has also proven to be a way of being lucky, in the sense that I don't want to lose. So the fact that we don't want to lose means that I'm going to put everything I have to hopefully be in a chance to be successful. So I think you need to go to your mother-in-law dinner party. That's one lesson. So that's the luck component. But then you have 10 years of very hard work. So both are really important.
I think if you don't go to mother-in-law's dinner party, you're not going to have a mother-in-law for very long.
It's true.
But I do want to ask, you mentioned like not liking to lose there. In terms of not liking to lose, in terms of high performance, what does that word mean to you when I say it? And how do you define high performance as a leader today?
It's very hard to define it, Harry, but you feel it when you see it. It's typically people that bring energy. Like you see people that are like constantly not taking energy away, but bringing energy to the workspace. It's people that are focused on the solution and not so much on the problem. When you are fast growth, you have problems. Things are not working the way they should. And you want people that go after it and say, okay, I'm going to solve it. Not only that design a PowerPoint or a presentation on how the solution should look. That's not high performance. And I'm totally against that. It's people that say, it's on me, I'm going to fix it. This is how it's going to look. This is the time it's going to take. And they deliver. To me, that's high performance. And the reality is that the easiest way to spotting high performance is when you have a team of high performers. When someone is not up to par, you can tell right away. And you can ask anyone on the team and they can tell you right away someone is not carrying their burden. So that's how I define it.
This is something I struggle with, though. If someone's not quite carrying their burden, sometimes you have to let them fail to learn the lesson. How do you think about giving them enough space to let them fail versus stepping in and preventing a mistake that could have been solved?
Harry, clearly not my strength, clearly. So I'm not anyone to give any lessons on this. I think feedback is important, and I try to be extremely transparent. People should know where they're standing the whole time. And there are different types of mistakes. We don't want to have mistakes of lack of action because I was paralyzed, or those mistakes I don't typically tolerate. If you made a decision and it's a wrong one, and then you own it, that's perfectly okay. Because the reasoning behind that is that we're all learning. And if you're learning, it's normal to make mistakes, and therefore, okay, I made decision A. It wasn't the right one. I'm going to fix it. This is how it's going to look next time. And those loops are extremely important to us. It's very ingrained in our culture. The way we operate it, we don't know. We need to learn. We need to act fast. We need to make decisions. If the decisions are not great, we're going to fix them.
I totally agree with you in terms of kind of optimizing for learning. In terms of kind of optimizing for other things, I think the speed of execution is one of the clearest signs that I see in companies that I invest in that work well. When you think about the velocity of execution, how do you think about how important speed of execution is, and how do you determine when you can go fast and when you should go slow?
Harry, I think when you're starting, speed is everything. There's nothing but speed. Because again, you're trying to tackle a problem. For us, we started processing payments in Brazil. One day we say we're going to go to Africa. What do you know about that? Nothing. What do you need to do? You need to make sure you iterate fast enough to be able to have enough feedback from the problem to tell you this is not the path to go, or this is the path to go. So speed for us, it's of essence, and there's nothing more important than it. There are obviously, as you grow, there are barriers. You need to make sure you are making mistakes that you can walk back. You need to make sure you understand the regulatory framework. We are now a public company, so there's more things to take into account. But when in doubt, I'd always choose speed. I think that's the only way to learn. And again, both of us are very young, and there's nothing more important than learning. And the best way of learning is trying stuff. And as you try it, you'll learn more. So you can spend 1 month trying to guess what's the right answer. You can take 1 day, make a decision, see how it goes, iterate, and then go to the next one.
So I totally agree with you. I engaged in speed of execution and decision making last year. I wrote I think the reason the show is doing better and better these days is because I'm opening up a little bit more about how I fucked up so many times. But I made fast decision specifically once and put a lot of money to work, and it was a mistake. And there, it didn't serve me well, and I've taken real lessons from that on where to spend time investing, even if I have a compressed timeline to make a decision. Has there been a time when speed has caught you up? When was it, and what was your takeaway?
So, Harry, there's been, so yes, many times, absolutely, and I think the key there is to own it. And the issue, the way I see it, it's not typically the first mistake. It's how, when you fall in love with that decision and you want to keep doubling down on it because either ego or you get too emotionally embedded on that decision. So on hiring, I made mistakes on hiring. I've hired some great people that didn't work out, and that was my mistake. And I hired them. I always say, let's do it fast. Let's make sure we give people the opportunity. Sometimes you make mistakes, and that's perfectly okay. What I don't accept, or what I try to avoid, is falling in love with the mistake and say, okay, I made a mistake, and that's a sunk cost, and therefore I'm going to continue to invest on that forever and ever when the signals are telling me that it was the wrong decision. So hundreds of those.
What were the hiring mistakes? I always have fallen for logos. I hire people because of the logos, and they're not as good as they thought.
Yes, every single time. It happens to all of us, particularly when you're growing up and you're young and you're a CEO that doesn't have many references from previous experiences. Yes, someone is a VP at a big corporation and you say, okay, that's going to fix all of my problems. First of all, I learned that no one fixes all of their problems. We are a team and we fix them together. I also learned that in many, many cases, the solution is right in front of you inside the current team, and you end up falling in love with someone who is a great presenter or someone who worked at great companies, which they might have been great there. It means nothing, but it's always the person and the situation. And growing up, I would typically focus a little bit more on the CV and less on the situation. Now I try to match the person and the situation. Is this person really going to fit this thing we're asking them to do? That's it, hopefully.
I totally agree with you. You said the word focus there. It was something that a lot of your investors spoke to me about, was bluntly your ability to focus and hone in on what really matters. When you think about prioritization, do you have a prioritization framework mindset for determining what one or two things move the needle? Because when you're in 35 countries, there's so many things you could be focused on.
Harry, we probably have a cheat sheet for this, which is we listen to our customers. We deal in enterprise payments, so our customers are big, they have opinions, and they know their stuff. So it's very easy. You ask them, where should we go next? What's the next thing we should be doing? Where are we not performing? And then you take that as the guiding principle, and everything else, which is not going to impact your customers, you try to not focus on. And impacting your customer might be how good you are in HR, because the people you're putting in front of your customers are not great enough. And therefore, I might be focusing for 1 or 2 months in an HR front, or in finance, or in expansion. But for us, that has always been the hack. For instance, we don't do product roadmaps on our own. We ask our customers, what should we do next? We started doing paying, so customers buying from a company. Then at some point, we say, guys, what else should we do? Airbnb came to us and Uber came to us and say, we want to do the opposite flow. We want to do payouts. Great. That's our product strategy. We are now going to do payouts. We want to do fraud. We want to do issuing. So being able to have something that it's a guiding principle, and for us, it's our customers, makes everything else much easier. If I spend too much time on something that it's not going to have an impact on customers, then I'm probably doing something wrong.
I totally get you. My question to you is, one, often the most vocal customers don't speak for the majority of your customer base. They're just the most vocal and they're probably super users. And two, there's always a lot of input. You can't take it all. So how do you know when to listen to customers versus to say, no, we're going to double down and focus on this quarter?
It's extremely weird, Harry, that we're going to say we're going to double down and not listen. I cannot even recall one time when that has happened. Typically, when you have smart customers, the way we do, they give you signals in the same direction. They all want you to go to Africa. Why? Because they face the same challenges there than they once faced in Latin America, where we started. So you start to see the signal. Obviously, you don't run after the first chat, but if you start to see consistently that people are asking you for payouts or for Africa or for APAC or go to India, suddenly there's a voice out there that you need to start listening to. So that has served us well so far. We haven't had cases where our customer needs haven't guided us to a better place than from where we were before. We went public. We went public because we felt that we wanted to be better perceived by our customers. We wanted to give them an additional level of comfort. It all goes together.
I like that. Yeah, I know. I totally get that. I'm always just so split between the many things that I could do. So I totally get you. I think we learn a lot from mistakes. You mentioned hiring mistakes. Yeah, I mentioned losing money in that bad investment. Fucking hell. But my question to you is, like, we learn from painful lessons. Can you just tell me about, like, a specific lesson that you've had in the dLocal journey that was painful, but weirdly you're actually quite pleased to have had it?
Totally. Back in 2019, we ran a process to get our first investor. We had bootstrapped dLocal from 2016 to 2019. First of all, you don't run processes. Very bad idea. That's something I learned, and I'm glad we ran that failed process, because we wouldn't be here otherwise. But the real lesson behind that is that we weren't dreaming big enough. We came from Uruguay, and we thought, okay, we brought the company to this level. This is a time where you find someone bigger to acquire you, or someone you got this far away, but companies from Uruguay don't go to the next level. And that's a very painful mistake, and it was a big one by us. Luckily enough, we lived another day as an independent company, and we can tell the story today. But worrying too much about how far we could get, or being too, we weren't ambitious enough. We were afraid that we wouldn't be good enough, and that was a mistake. And it was a very painful one. Probably we held the company back for a few years for that. I can tell, because sorry.
No, I'm just intrigued. What was the realization that you could do it? You could go further. You could go bigger.
Then suddenly we did have an investor. We were profitable, but an outside investor, General Atlantic in this case, came in and told us, guys, you have an amazing company. It has nothing worse than any of the great companies we see out there. You have the potential. You need to tweak one or two things here and there, because you need to see skill. And suddenly we unlocked it. We stopped thinking about the short term. We say, okay, this is how it's going to build it. This is how we're going to build it for the long run. We are building this thing to own for 100 years. That was a great unlock. GA played an extremely important role. We wanted a partner that was going to add value. We were profitable, so we didn't need the money. And it was our first ever outside investor, so we were kind of worried of how this is going to work. And the reality is that it was before and after. There's a before and after in our history, because we were lucky enough to choose the right partner.
And we're going to talk about the fundraise itself. I do just want to ask, why you said, like, running a process, not a good idea. Why is it not a good idea?
I think you'll end up attracting the wrong type of investors. Many of the great investors won't participate in processes. I think you sometimes defer too much to the bankers, and it's our role as management to explain what we do as a company and put our voice out there. And sometimes they don't allow you to trust your gut. So we weren't optimizing for evaluation. We wanted to optimize for the right partner. And the process says that you need to have 5 bids, and then 3 bids, and then 1 bid. And it's not for us, it wasn't the right way of doing it. It was a failure. We didn't get to what we wanted. We ended up closing around 3 months after the process independently on our own.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, bankers for fundraising processes, I get in trouble for saying this. I hate it. Not a fan. Not a fan. But now my inbox is going to be screwed. So well done, Harry. I do want to ask that, you mentioned the raise itself there. You bootstrapped for 4 years and scaled pretty globally without venture funding. Why? And in hindsight, what were the pros and what were the cons of not raising money early?
Harry, why? Because we didn't have any other option. We never even thought of the option. We started out of Uruguay, and there wasn't venture capital out there. There was. It's not that we had a Y Combinator and 5 other VCs waiting to give us money. we said, okay, if we want to build a company, how's the way you build it? You have customers that pay for it, and those payments are higher than your expenses, and therefore you're profitable, and that's how you start scaling. That's why it wasn't any master plan. It was the way it happened. And I think that has become really deeply ingrained in our DNA. That really defined our culture of who we are. We are very frugal. We really care about every dollar. We spoke a lot about customers. They were not only, they were our investor and our customers at the same time, because they were funding everything we did. So I think that became really deeply ingrained. I spoke about the mistake. If I would have known a little bit earlier what good investors would have brought to the table, probably I would have done it, or would have tried to do it a few years earlier, because you really see a different world out there.
What do good investors bring to the table then?
First of all, they trust you, and it's hard to, when you're alone, when you're bootstrapping, you don't have any signal. Other than your customers, you don't have any signal that what you're creating is actually generating value. So the first time that someone comes in and says, yes, you now have value, this is your valuation, this is how it looks, it was very important to us. And then I think in Bootstrap, when you're Bootstrap, you're working you're playing on very hard mode. You're playing against, you don't have any tools. You want to get an intro, you don't get an intro. You want to think how other companies do it. It's much harder to have a network. All those things a great partner or investor provides you, and it was very helpful to us.
I want to know about the mindset shift, because you go from, as you said, playing on hard mode, where there's not a huge amount of cash kicking around to try new experiments, to try marketing, to try a lot of different things. And then how much did you raise with this first round?
It was all secondary funds, always.
Okay, so whatever it is, but there's like, I don't know, 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cash that drops into your pocket when you've had nothing. How do you retain a mindset of frugality when getting 50 or 100 million suddenly to play with in your bank?
Harry, probably the answer is that you fall somewhere in the middle between what you were before and what your average investor wants you to become. Most of my disagreements with our investors were more in the direction of, we want to keep our culture, we want to be frugal, we want to be humble, we want to build it block by block. But then you learn. If you have a new vantage point and you don't incorporate any of it, you're not someone smart enough. And so when we were going public, GA was very instrumental, and other investors were very instrumental in saying, this is how your finance team will look. And these are the investments you need to put today in order to be able to scale. So in those areas where you don't know, you generally need to listen because others have seen it. But then how do we serve our customers? We serve them the same way as we did back in 2016. Anyone can call me, I'll pick up the phone, I'll jump on a plane, because I think that's DNA, and that you should never lose.
I totally get you, and I think that's right. In terms of investing for growth, one thing that I found quite striking was like your geographic expansion. We mentioned 35 countries earlier, and just what struck me, that sounds very weird. What was striking to me is your choice of going broad and not deep in many respects. And I hope that's okay with me to say, but it's like you could have had 10 countries and just gone for deep penetration within them, all about usage. Instead, you went wide. What was the strategic thinking around the geographic expansion and that breadth versus depth?
So Harry, it's a very strategic decision for us. So first of all, in payments, 35 countries is not very wide. There are many payment companies that say we do 190 countries. After 7 years of work, we still do 35. So we've gone generally deep. The other thing is that we've chosen very hard countries. We started out of Latin America, then we moved to India, then we launched in Africa. Now we do some other countries in APAC. So we've always looked for the places which had the higher friction. And there's always a trend between going a little bit wider. So LATAM, we've spent 3 years in LATAM expanding into new geographies and then going really deep into countries where we were ready. We then went to India, and it took us a few years to be ready in India and feel comfortable with what we have, and only then we go to next level. The reality is that in payments, in the industry where we exist, merchants want simplicity. So we need to be able to solve multiple problems for them at the same time. You become much more valuable. So having the ability of doing for someone like Google, having the ability of doing Nigeria and then Mexico and then Brazil and then South Africa, it's really powerful. So that's why we decided to go a little bit deeper. But I don't foresee us going to 60 markets in the next quarter. That's never reality for us, because we generally need to go local. We need to have people on the ground. We need to understand the regulatory frameworks, the payments behavior. So we cannot do 100 times at a time. 100 countries at a time.
Respectfully, do you like the hard countries because no one else is there because they're hard?
That's where we come from, Harry. And probably I think there's always a matter of fit from the leadership of the company and the problem they're tackling. I was born in Uruguay. We started processing payments in Brazil. Going to no one ever cared about Uruguay, obviously, and Brazil was it's not the Brazil of today where it's sexy, and no one cared about the Brazil back in the day when we started. Now Nigeria looks like that, and it's full of friction, and people say it's impossible to build a business. We find it tempting, and we also believe that those places. The first time I flew to India, I came back and I called Hako, our president. I told him, Hako, this is a nightmare. We are never gonna make it. And then we said, look, it's a nightmare. We need to make it because it's very hard. If it was so hard on us, it would be hard on everyone. That's a huge barrier to entry. Let's solve this thing, and we'll be generating value for our customers. And that has been it.
How do you make geographic expansion work on the people side? Because there's two schools of thought. One that says you always need people from the core team to bring the first culture. And then there's the other school of thought that says you need local people who understand the local culture. So how do you make geographic expansion work in India, in Nigeria, in all of these new, very different societies and cultures?
I think the answer here is that you need both. You need, if you only go with people that have been with you and work in your headquarters, you have no chance because you don't go deep on the country. But if the best example for us is China. When we were starting to sell to Chinese merchants, so we said for every Facebook there's going to be a ByteDance or TikTok. We need to be able to serve them both. We had no idea how to do it. The first thing we did is we hired 2 Chinese people out of Shenzhen. No chance. They were a complete satellite, like no connection whatsoever with the company. Then I moved there and I realized that I moved there and we brought 2 more people with me from Uruguay. I said, it's absolutely impossible that we're going to be able to do this unless we find great Chinese local people. The reality is somewhere in the middle. You need to bring your culture to the new place because if not, you don't have a way of cooperating with the rest of the company. But you need local people. Otherwise, it's absolutely impossible. We have today people in every country where we operate, and we have a lot of people inside the company moving. So we have people from Mexico living in South Africa. We have Argentinians living in India. We have Uruguayans living in China. And we really encourage that because in that mixture, we are building bridges. And in order for you to be able to build a bridge, you need to understand both sides of it.
What did you learn from your time in China? That's a big fucking move. Born in Uruguay, moved to China to fix 2 Shenzhen employees who aren't working. That's a big move. What did you learn?
Well, I learned a lot. I wanted to stay, and with my now wife, we decided to come back. But it was extremely tempting. China, it's obviously it's. I went in 2019, so it's a slightly different China than the one today. I haven't had the chance to go back, but the level of innovation, the level of hard work, the ambition I saw there was mind blowing, and I was blind to it up until 1 year before. And I think many of us are blind. So the level of ambition that Chinese companies have in emerging markets, it's undeniable. And for us, it was great to have the ability of looking at it firsthand, not someone else telling me. It's absolutely impressive.
You mentioned the team members moving around the world. I think another thing that's very striking to me when I look at dLocal is actually 650 people, respectfully, is not a large team given the size of the company. How do you think about the benefits of being a small and lean team, despite the size of the company?
I was just before this call, I was having a call and they were asking me how many more people you want for the next quarter. We don't want many more people. We like small teams. I'm a big believer in small teams. I think small teams can achieve huge things. I feel we are many now. 640 is already a sizable number. I know in comparison with our revenue numbers, we are still small. But still, I believe small teams drive ownership, and ownership it's extremely important because you have the feeling that you are doing something that has an impact, and bigger teams have harder times cooperating. So I'll always choose the smaller team that is able to deliver what we want to do. In our case, we are a very remote organization. I have personally lived in Israel for the last 6 years, so this has been home for me. And I've been away from our headquarters forever. And I think that has become a really, it has become a strength for us because we know that our business is distributed. We have customers in China, in India, in Europe, in the US, and we have operations across 35 emerging markets. So you're always going to be far away from someone. So what do you need to do? You need to have a team that is amazing, that it's empowered, that really understands your culture. Smaller teams are easier to keep coherent. That's at least our experience.
So I have I have remote teams as well, and I have insecurities in my own leadership that I'm inspiring them enough, given that we're remote. I don't know how happy they are because I don't see them at the end of the day. Just when you think about your insecurities in your own leadership, what would you say your biggest insecurities are in your leadership today?
Oof, are plenty of them. If there's anything, dLocal has taught me that, or dLocal has made sure that I'm never comfortable in 7 years in this role from the day we started. Every time I felt we were comfortable, the reality below me changed, and suddenly I had to quickly adapt. I thought I knew now how to run a company that was invested by a private equity, and then we went public, and then you are constantly learning something new. So I'm very insecure. I always feel that I need to be better, and that there are. I'm sure when I speak to other CEOs, I say, "Wow, they do know what they're doing," and I'm trying to learn as I go. So I think that keeps us very humble, and that keeps us very hungry. The day I hope the day I feel I know everything doesn't come. I need to. I think there's a healthy level of insecurity that needs to come with a job like mine. Uh, and it's very hard with the team. It's very hard to know how good you are in any given day, because our job is to make things happen, not necessarily one particular, but enables it. So it's not an easy thing.
Seba, I've spent too much time with Americans, so I go deeper than this. I have specific insecurities around age and relevance, which is I always am terrified of being. Do you know Home Alone, the Christmas movies, Macaulay Culkin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where's he now? No one knows. No one's seen him in years. I'm terrified of being Macaulay Culkin of venture capital. That's what scares the shit out of me. So if that's what scares me, and that's my insecurity, age and relevance tied together, what is specifically your insecurity?
Wow, it's a good question. Again, public speaking. I suffered. You said that dLocal was always, or we are still not well known. We were always a company that was much less known than the good business we were, and a lot of that is for me to blame. I don't feel comfortable in the spotlight. I like to live a life that is very simple, and I think a lot of that is insecurity. I don't want to be the big shot CEO. I don't feel comfortable with that. I want to be doing my job, and I think that has sometimes been a benefit for dLocal. If I would have a higher profile, probably our life would be a little bit easier, but I don't feel secure enough to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the hard thing now is actually being public is part of the job, actually. Do you know what I mean? And that's a big change that we've seen. That and the politicization of leadership, I think, is the biggest challenges that leaders face today. I do have to ask, you said there about kind of marriage and your wife. What are the secrets to a happy marriage, Seba? I'm single, but always looking for love life secrets. What are the secrets to happy marriage?
Harry, that's a hard one. I can tell you, I've been with my wife for 15 years, since we were 17. I was 18, she was 17. So getting to 15 years. I don't know. I admire her. I love her. We get along extremely well, and she's a partner. That's all I can ask for. And I'm rooting for her, and hopefully she's rooting for me as well. That's all. And we are a team together. That's how I feel it.
Can I ask, what do you tell yourself? Like, what's your mind talk when you don't know if you can do something? You said earlier, like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Like, what do you tell yourself when you're not sure if you can do something?
If I'm speaking too much to myself, that's a problem. I try not to live in my mind. I really believe in efficiency of movements. It's something I watch a lot of NBA, and the best NBA players are typically the ones that don't think, they act, and you can see that everything is very natural. So if I'm spending too much time in my own mind, there's something wrong. I'll rather execute in some sort of direction, or do something else in my life. Spend some time in a different ecosystem with my friends, with my family, in a place where I'm not the CEO of dLocal, but I'm Seba forever. And typically helps. That typically unlocks a lot of things, because when you are stuck with something, go do something else, come back, you'll find a new perspective.
Can I ask, We mentioned marriage. In terms of like other significant milestones in one's life, I can't believe I'm aligning marriage to this, but going public is pretty fucking cool. Like that is a highlight of one's business career for sure. When you think about the going public and the IPO process, why first did you decide 2021 was the right time to go public?
So, Harry, the honest answer is that we didn't know before that IPO was a possibility for us. I was telling you, up until 2019, we had Bootstrap, so it happened really fast. EGA there played a very important role, calling us and said, guys, there's a window for you. Business like yours can do IPOs in this current environment. We are very proud today to be one of the very few IPOs that are ahead of its IPO price. We've done very well so far in the public markets. But once we first of all, I had to understand what an IPO meant. So the first thing we did is we jumped on a call and I asked, okay, how does it work? Like, what are the things that need to happen? But once we understood, public companies are the big leagues. That's the way I look at it. And you want to be playing in the bigger leagues you can. And whether you like it or not, you can delay it. But over time, great companies are built in the public markets. And we want to be a great company. And for that to happen, we had to go through that process. We were never very well known. We wanted to have the increased visibility. We wanted to have, we are in a business that requires a lot of trust. Having transparency around our financials would bring trust to our merchants, to our providers. So it was a no-brainer from a strategic standpoint. Then there's a question of how well you're going to do. And we are still answering that.
Can you walk me through the process? And can you also just help me understand, you mentioned not like loving public speaking. You have to tell your story to countless bankers, to countless investment banks. Did you find that challenging, having to constantly be the front man, telling the story, inspiring bankers?
Harry, not so much, but because I love to have the spotlight on the business. And during the IPO, you are presenting dLocal. I could speak about dLocal for 100 hours. What I don't enjoy is speaking about myself. And bankers and investors want to know, how will you make money and how will you expand and what are the new products. That I can speak of forever. That's a passion of mine. So it wasn't very challenging in that sense. And there are things that you're speaking about, something that you know a lot about, probably much more than many of your counterparts, because you live this problem every single day. So having the ability of explaining something that hopefully you understand really well, I really enjoyed it. That part of the process was great. It can be exhausting, but great.
Was there any surprising parts of the process?
Yes, everything was surprising, but I didn't understand before the role that banks play, and I do understand it now. For better or worse, that was a surprise.
In what way? What role did you not like? How did that shape out?
So, first of all, I didn't know that banks had a role to play in an IPO, and in ours they were important, and they did help. But you also understand the dynamics of that business, and it's a business that I think it has some sort of potential for disruption. Let's put it that way. I also didn't know the amount of advisors that go into an IPO in terms of legal advice, compliance advice, tax advice. So that's something I actually enjoyed, because it's one of those times where you have to line up 50 different teams and say, guys, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to look. This is the Excel sheet. These are the deadlines. And if there's something, Harry, I'm proud. We decided in October we would IPO. We were going to IPO on the 25th May. That's my birthday. We were delayed 1 week because the SEC didn't answer in time, and we were delayed by 1 week. So building a project like this in 9 months and say we're going to make it, and we're going to make it on time, it's something that I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, that is very rare as well. Can I ask, what's the biggest difference for you when you compare being private versus being public?
The quarterly questions are new to us. I never thought of our business in quarters. I never thought if something's better to happen this month or the other because of the quarters. I always wanted it to happen as fast as possible. So that's new. I think the work you need to do to explain your company, it's something that it's new and it's positive, because it helps you think about it and really have a new stakeholder in mind when you're making decisions. And I'm still surprised of how much weight it's being put into tones or how or not numbers. I look at our business through its numbers and through its metrics, and sometimes the tone of the voice will say a lot, and that's something I'm still learning.
Because I think leadership changes a lot over time. When you think about the changing style of leadership, but just kind of style of the business, what gets easier over time and what gets harder over time in your mind?
So easier, you have more tools. You have access to more people, to more investors, to more talent, and that you have more tools. And having more tools, if you know how to use them, it should your life should be easier. And you have a reputation, and building a reputation is extremely hard. So once you have that, it's a little bit easier. And the harder part is to for us at least, it's to retain. I want to maintain a culture that I'm proud of and identified and I can identify with in a context where we are growing extremely fast and we are doing so in the public markets. So keeping that balance, it's a place where I spend a lot of time. How much should we evolve versus how much should we build up with who we once were?
What are the first things to break in scaling teams?
Everything breaks all the time. They break in steps. Whenever in at dLocal in 2016, our sales team was broken. Then we say, okay, let's have account management and customer success. Then finance breaks because you hit a new skill. Then HR breaks. Then as you're growing, things are thought for a given size, and suddenly you are operating at 10x the size. So it breaks. The question is what's currently breaking and what you should be focusing on fixing, because once you fix it, it's going to be good for 1 or 2 years, but it's going to break again, and you're going to need a new iteration, and you're going to need to think of that system again.
When you think about hiring people and working with people in their current phase, I think some people are great for a certain phase, but they don't have what it takes to scale to the next phase. It's just the nature of some people, sadly. The challenge is they think they do. How do you manage out a situation where someone is okay for this stage, but actually for 1,000-person dLocal doing 3x the transactions that you're doing today, they're not ready for that? How do you manage that process? Because that's one I struggle with.
Harry, first of all, I don't think people are not ready because of the experience. That part I leave aside. I don't believe you need a certain level of experience to be running a certain size of business. But sometimes people don't have the attitude, or they just don't want to do it. And part of that, something that has worked for us, it's having a very low ego culture where you're not the owner of a given title or for a given project. You are taking care of it for a given period of time, and you do the best you can for that given period, and then you move to the next thing, and it's perfectly okay. And you're not less important to the company if you're not running it, or if you're not the chief something today. You might be a VP or a head of whatever, and that's also okay. And we have many cases like that in the company. Jaco, who is our president, I mentioned him before. He was a software developer, then he became our CTO, then he moved to COO. Then I told him, Jaco, we need the title, you're now the president. And we have people moving around different places in the organization. You want to keep a low ego, and I'm the first one to hopefully to be transmitting that. I'm not the CEO of dLocal no matter whatever happens. I'm the CEO as long as I'm doing a good job. And if there's someone who is doing a better job than they should be the one taking over. And that's the DNA, and that's the way we should all be thinking about this. Because we win together. We are a team, and if we win, we all look good, and if we lose, we all look bad.
Did you ever get high on your own supply? I think probably a couple of years ago when I was, 22 or so, and it was getting bigger and the show was doing better. And you believe your own bullshit, especially when you're younger. Did you ever, CEO of a public multinational company, young, did you ever believe the hype?
No, I still don't. to be honest,
I can lend you some of my confidence. I have
no, Harry. But part of it's cultural. Uruguay, it's a very unique place in that sense, where being humble is something that it's very much ingrained in our DNA. I want to be ambitious. I want us to win. I want to compete, and I want us to be amazing. But I don't think too highly of myself. I'm learning, and like the guy next door.
Final one for you. What does winning actually mean to you?
Feeling that you did everything there was to be done. And you never win. You win for a few minutes, and then you are again back in the grind. But when I feel like a winner, it's when we gather a group of people. They share a common set of values. they live by them and they deliver on something that they agreed they would. And you celebrate for 2 minutes. I'm very bad at celebrating, extremely bad. But you celebrate for 2 minutes and then you go again. But those few seconds that where things work the way you expected, that's winning for me.
I love that, and I totally agree with you in terms of kind of. I always say like make sure you left nothing on the field. But I want to move into a quick fire round, Seba. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sure, let's go.
So I'm going away tomorrow. I need to at least sound intellectual with some books. What's the favorite book and why?
Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. And because I read it a few times, the first time when I was 18, and it taught me that you can be many things at the same time. It's something that I was struggling with, and you can be many things at the same time.
Why were you struggling with it?
Because I used to play close to professional basketball, and I went to school, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to live where I live, and I was running a company, and it's hard to do everything at the same time. And I was saying, you need to sacrifice something. No, you can be many things at the same time, and it's okay.
I remember when someone said you either have to choose media company or venture, and I said, fuck off. They were a very successful VC though, so I did listen to them at the time. Tell me, what's your biggest strength and what's your biggest weakness?
I think I'm good at identifying talent where others don't. When you look at the talent profile in dLocal, many of the best people we have weren't obvious. We've met them along the way, and we spotted them, and they're extremely good today. And the biggest weakness is that I really suffer when we lose, and I take it personal, and I shouldn't, but I do.
Can I ask, do you have a favorite or preferred interview question?
Wow.
It's like
no.
Doug Leone at Sequoia asked, what's your relationship like with your siblings? Because the way that you describe your siblings will say a lot about you, which I thought was really interesting.
I typically ask them, what else? What else should I know? And I like that because it allows people to open up, and you get. I'm not a big fan of traditional interviews. We need to know each other because you might be amazing, but you're not a good fit, or you don't think you're amazing, and we might find you amazing. So tell me what else, and that's in many cases where we get the best insights.
What's the hardest element of your role with dLocal today?
I mentioned it before, but evolving our culture in the public eye and having to report quarterly, it's something I'm getting used to.
If you could be CEO of any other company, what would it be and why?
Harry, I'll give you two. One is on the payments world, Adyen. I don't want to be CEO of Adyen, but I really admire the way they built it. They are a payments company, Dutch, humble, global, serving every customer on earth. I really, really admire them. But the second one, it's probably the most interesting one. I want to be an MBA in GM. I really admire the guys that don't have in the MBA, you have a franchise, you have a clear budget, you cannot overspend, and you need to be smart and think in the long term. That's an amazing job to have.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known at the start of your career in tech, 10 years ago?
I would have want to know that everyone is trying to make it, and everyone is making it as they go, and no one has the perfect answer. And when I meet some of my idols in the business world, they are human beings. They make mistakes. They have lunch, dinner. They have wives and families, and understanding that we are all learning. That's something I would have wanted to know earlier.
You're the screaming success of Uruguay. When Uruguayan entrepreneurs, first-time founders come to you and ask for advice, what do you tell them? Or what would you tell them? What would you want them to listen to this and take away?
That they can dream bigger. It sounds super cliche, but from where I come from, you can build an amazing company from Uruguay and kill it globally. And there's no one that is smarter than you just because of where they were born. You need to show it. No one is going to give it for you for free either. You need to go and get it, but there's no reason why not.
Final one for you, Seba. What do the next 5 years hold for you and for dLocal? We have this show in 2027. Where are we then?
Sure. dLocal will be the provider, the financial services provider for emerging markets. We're only starting. We have 35 countries today. We're going to expand into more places, new products, payments, payouts, issuing. the whole world in the payments world to be built. And for me personally, who knows? Life is crazy. I would have had no idea that I would be here 5 more years. I don't know. I love what I do.
Seba, listen, I've loved doing this. I'm so pleased that you got over the dislike of public speaking to talk to me. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for the time, my friend.
Harry, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
You are a star.